know-how that they're going to end up with a contract job. Does the psyche actually change, and does it make difficult in mass level skillings that happen? What is the reality, Dilip?
So I just want to take forward what Ram said. So if you take the NSDC ecosystem, last year about 1 million people were trained and placed. 70% of them, or 63.5% were placed last year. We're doing an average of 68%. The first thing that we understand is that it's difficult to find a person to train. The question that he asks is, what am I going to do after training? And he doesn't believe the training partner. He says, if it's free, I'll do it, and I'll decide whether I want to take the job or don't want to take the job. And there are different types of people there. There are people who work on agriculture, farmland, for whom flexi is the best boon, because they want to work off harvest season and they want to go back to the fields during harvest, right? So if your production cycle or your flexi job cycle matches their cycle, you have roughly about 50 to 100 million people who love to do that, right? But they have a thing at back, which is agriculture. They're looking for something there. Even in that, there's a distinction, right? Not everybody would want to be trained for the same type of job, right? So there are some people who are willing to work in the house as a house help, or work as a general duty assistant, or work as a driver, or work as a plumber or mason in the construction business here and go back. But they all have one common dream. After 2 cycles of this, where will I be? The problem in this space is that if you start at 6,000 rupees, after 20 years, you end at 14,000 rupees. You retire at that. The next batch starts around 10,000 rupees and goes to 22,000 rupees. So if you develop, and the next batch starts around 18,000 and goes to 30,000 and 30,000 to 6, and then it goes up. Flexi will become cool if Flexi actually shows the diagonal improvement and you break the glass ceiling for everyone there. It's happening, right? Because a majority of the jobs in the construction sector, which is going to be the largest employer in this country, in the textile sector, in the gems and jewelry sector, are actually flexi. The nature of the job is that. But none of you operate in that space, or very few of you operate in that space, because those don't add millions to your bottom line or things like that. So the area where this is required, right, where you want to organize the unorganized and call them flexi, is not being done by this group. So that's the first point I really want to make. The second is that most employers believe that given a head, 2 arms, and a leg, they can train people better than any training organization is there. We did a survey of over 6,000 companies. And we said that how many people do you employ at the entry level that is below 15,000 rupees a month? And would you be willing to pay a 1 month's placement salary, right? 1 month's salary as placement fee to a training organization if they gave you this person. And said, would you pay it if 3 months, a person trained for 3 months, 6 months, a year? Less than 10% said that there would be 6,000 companies. Less than 10% said that they're willing to pay, right? Then we did another survey to someone else in the company who does the recruitment, right? Okay? And we said, how many of these jobs are vacant? And hundreds and thousands of jobs are vacant. So we find that within companies, sometimes 2 people don't talk to each other, and then they go to an agency and say, can you get me people for this job? I'll have them on contract, right? Because I can't find people. Right? Flexi is not cool for the company, flexi is not cool for the person, but they're doing out of necessity. So sometimes flex is out of necessity in these cases. So the individual, right, actually if he sees a career path in whatever he's doing, he's willing to join. If he sees progression, he's willing to join, right? And private sector is not trusted. If a company were to advertise for young professionals to join a particular company, they will get X amount of advertisements. I know for a fact there's at least one young professional in the room who's working with the ministry. If a ministry were to advertise for young professional, right? Same, flexi, temp, no career path, right? They would get X into 1,000 applications. So flexi can be cool if you have a reputation and if you show a career path. Currently, the flexi does not trust private sector's reputation at that, and they believe that you're exploiting them, you are paying them less than what they need, and they say, why should I get skilled? If I'm skilled, I get 6,000 rupees, 6,248 rupees in state aid because that's the minimum wage, and if I'm highly skilled and I get the same job, I still get that 600, 842 rupees because that's the minimum wage. That's the challenge. That's what the individual does not actually look at that, and I think, Ram, because it's God, right? So Ram actually said that the parents are the biggest, and society is the biggest block to this. So, your conversation has to be with society and the parents rather than the individual. And it's a societal engineering change that we have to bring around, not an individual change at the entry level.
We have to distinguish between self-employment and employment. Very many times in our minds we are confused what is self-employment and what is employment. So when we are clear about people who are seeking self-employment, for them there is no concept of flexi, full and all that kind of a stuff. They are another kind of a thing. But people who are seeking employment have to be seen slightly differently. Otherwise we get confused with this who is employed and who is self-employed.
Thank you, Ram. I think when you go back to this is my favorite slide and I show it everywhere where I go. 2 years ago when ISF was formed, we wanted to have a discussion, sort of go on a campaign with educational institutes, and PR agency came up with a campaign called Temp is Cool. 2 years from now, I see the slide has changed to Flexi is Cool. Temp as a word itself has its connotations, it's what we are talking about today. Going and telling people that temp is cool, in our own mind, we realize it's going to have its challenges. In the last 15 years, we've juggled with words. Like I said, contractor is a widely understood word. We moved it to deputy. Today we're talking about flex worker. But oftentimes we mistake that the flex worker concept is about flexibility to the worker. It is not. The flexibility is to the employer, actually, if you look at it. And in that, this poor guy or girl gets lost. And we are trying to see, how do we actually make it cooler for the person who's actually called a flex worker. So, we ourselves as an industry also juggling with words. We're playing with words. And that's where I want to bring, Sangeeta in and ask her, when she looks at people who are, let's say, permanent employees, you upskill them, you tell them you can go overseas, you can become the president of in America and kind of stuff that career aspirations we give. Whereas this guy who's coming through an agency, has a different batch. In some of the organizations, they also go to, they're not supposed to go to the gym and things like that. So how do you look at two different classes of employees, and what are the classic situations that you encounter?
Okay, so I'm going to take this from the point of view of not looking at flexi, which is flexible time and space and working hours, okay? And we're looking at this more from someone who's contracted in, so it's staff on hire. And just before I say something really controversial, I want to know how many of you are from corporate India here? As in the users of flexible staff? Okay. Oh, lots of them. So since none of you have rotten eggs, I'm going to start saying this, right? Because I have a feeling I'm going to get hit at the end of this. Corporate India tends to, when we want to look for somebody who's going to come in for a temporary period of time or a project, we want them to have more skills than anybody else within the company. Right? Because we want them to come in on day one, be productive on day one, deliver at productivity of somebody who has more experience than them, correct? We expect to provide them no training because they're supposed to have all the skills, right? They're an expert. in administration or IT or finance or anything else. So we expect them to have all those skills. We expect them to be a quick learner because we understand that our company is so unique. How can this man know anything about our company, or girl, know anything about our company or industry, right? Or the product. So I may have had somebody who has 10 years selling pharmaceuticals, but this person knows nothing about it. Only I can teach you this, correct? We expect them to be great team players because we don't want any team issues when they're working within the team. So there are a lot of concessions you're willing to make with people whom you employ on a permanent basis that we tend not to make when we employ somebody on contract. And that's got to do with fundamentally how we view this. We view, when we recruit someone, we're looking at saying, let's recruit someone for whom I can see a career path for 5 years, right? So we're invested in a career path for 5 years. We're willing to do the training and the development and the integration. For someone who's coming in as a temp, we tend to look at saying, this is a person who's going to be with me for 6 months, 8 months, sometimes for 2 months. So we're not really doing that investment. And the question really is to say, who's going to now do that investment? Somebody has to invest in competency building of these people. If it's not going to be corporate India, who else or how do we help provide that? We do distinctions on badges. So the word, by the way, and I have to tell you this, and I'm being filmed, right? So I may get fired for this. In our office, the person in our cafeteria, his name is Gyan, his designation is consultant. So the first time I saw that badge, I said, wow, he's, absolutely, absolutely. We had to find a nice name. We didn't want temp, we didn't want contract, so we used the word consultant. Consultant is cool. We badge them differently. Most of our engagement activities, anyone here who's an HR professional, who's done it in large organizations, we treat them differently. They're not included in engagement activities, right? I was very surprised about saying that they can't use the gym facilities if it's in the building and it's owned by the company. But see, we're treating them as second-class citizens, and that's our problem. I think, I agree with you, Ram, that yes, parents are very concerned. I have questions of, meri shaadi nahi hoegi if I'm not married, if I'm not permanent, right? That's there, but I think as corporations, federations, societies, we don't do anything to change that. And we have to do it. So, have I been controversial enough, and can I give up at this point? Thank you.
Yeah, I think, and what the examples I took was actually real. There are companies which actually said they can't use my gym. And the discrimination, I was in Penang last month, and there was a chip maker company that I walked into where they said the way to look at where your people are sitting, you look at the boards behind them. The nameplates of the guys who are in pink are all contractual in nature, either yours or somebody else. All the nameplates who are in orange are our core staff, So it is like it's a huge facility where about 500 people are sitting on a single floor. So the discrimination can go to that extent, but it's really up there. Now, I think when I want to possibly bring in Murli here and again look at when we are actually training people, with the notion, each sector has some realities. You look at multiple sectors, and you actually, that where they're exactly going into. Other nuances sector-wise, Murli?
I think some sectors traditionally, each sector has its own way of looking at this talent supply chain or whatever. I think 2-3 sectors in the past, if you look at financial services, they are okay with people not being on their roles because much of their job is in the field. So they're okay with saying, I'm selling ICICI, these products and so on and so forth. So we don't see too much of an issue there. And I'm talking specifically of that